The reason a podcast is valuable is the trust building element to it. I don't think any other format builds trust in the same way that a podcast does.
Sometimes done is better than perfect if it's a barrier.
Talking to people about their own personal relationship with money.
How do you break that down?
You will know this better than anyone. You need a hook to get people in.
It's not glamorified. It's not you put out a video, it got 1 million hits, and then you get 20 phone calls. Right?
Absolutely not. No one's calling me at this stage. Definitely not. The super niche stuff is a super niche audience.
What content can you create on a consistent schedule? So now I'm like, how can I best spend today? And how can I be as efficient as I can? Hello, my friends. I hope you're well. I hope you had a good day, evening, or night. Today we're talking to John all about podcasting. Hi, John.
Hello. Yeah, good. Thanks. Yourself?
Yes, super well. We were fortunate enough to meet through James, whose space we're in today.
Studio man.
And I was debating about how to start this because I think sometimes like podcasting can be a really challenging thing, right? And I think for me, I guess why should someone actually have a show like this as a whole? But then because I think there's a psychology kind of hurdle in the respect of creating content, but especially in a podcast environment. But also then like, what is the ROI, I guess?
Yeah.
Would you say?
I think it's the format dictates that more than anything else. Mm-hmm. So the reason a podcast is valuable is the trust building element to it. I don't think any other format builds trust in the same way that a podcast does. For a couple of reasons. First of all, you are sort of having a long form chat. So you can go into subjects way deeper than you can in other stuff. Sometimes even videos and documentaries and stuff. If you're watching a documentary, there's kind of like a point at which you need it to move on. With a podcast, you could sort of effectively ask questions forever. And if it's good content, it keeps going.
Do you think it's the first or easiest step into content creation, would you say?
I think audio only, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Simply because of the barrier that is video in terms of skills and everything. And you've got to think about camera setups and everything like that. Whereas if you do audio only, so easy to get a mic, so easy to talk to someone online, virtual on a video call.
Mm-hmm.
That's so accessible that actually, it's quite an easy first step into it, I'd say.
Do you think you're limiting like yourself though? Because I don't know whether I question audio only, unless obviously you're on the platform. But when you're looking at maybe social posts like LinkedIn or Instagram or Facebook, is there an audience, would you say, for audio only still?
Yeah, definitely. Because I think the thing in terms of marketing, like you say, and promoting the show, without video nowadays, it's hard to get it out there, definitely. But a lot of people, myself included, view the podcasting format as something you listen to while you're doing other stuff, while you're hoovering, while you're driving, that kind of thing. Yeah. So I think it's definitely still there, and I don't think that's going away.
Would you say then it's more of a step by step? So someone could start audio and then where's step 2?
I think so. Yeah, I think so because, for depending on who you are, if you're a business, it's a bit different. If you're an individual, you kind of learn the time required to sort of get to each step. So once you start on the audio step and you're like, actually, it's taking me too much time, it's not worth it for whatever reason, it's not for you. If you then introduce video purely for clips, so you film the whole thing, but only use clips, then you can see what time the promo takes. And then when you should go to a full video, you can see how long that takes. So I think that's why you'd do it potentially in that step if you're coming at it from a completely new perspective, if that makes sense.
And then, I guess you then can grow to the Diary of a CEO style, full form trailer-esque piece, right? And I think sometimes we get so, and this is true for any marketing, not necessarily a podcast, but it could also be true of a podcast. I think we get so hemmed in I need it to be Diary of a CEO quality instantly, right? Yeah. And I think that we struggle with the idea of I'm going to take one step, make a 1% improvement, next step, 1% improvement, one step, so on, right? And I think for me, especially with what I've done with marketing, it's always been so this is the results I've got previously from this output. Okay, but what happens if I double the output, right? And it's constantly that testing period. I mean, in your experience with podcasting, how do would you recommend people, or how would you look at like working with a client, because I know that's some of the work you do, to actually help them actually work out, should they have a podcast, but then secondly, like, what are the nuts and bolts of their podcast in regards to topics and like theme and etc. And or does that matter now?
Yeah, so I think in terms of the sort of nuts and bolts, you kind of have to have the reason why you're doing it first, then you go into the nuts and bolts. So like I said at the start, the reason why is the building trust element. I think you need to, if that's what you want to achieve, and you have, say you're selling a particular service or a product that can be gone into in depth, then it's worth doing from the start. Then the nuts and bolts from there all depends on how you want to package that, I guess, to be unique or to kind of be the same, because everyone is kind of getting used to this kind of format. So there's options on the table for sure.
I think there's obviously that psychology thing that we've talked about a little bit as well, but I think for me, I didn't overthink it. I was like, I enjoy talking about business, I enjoy talking about content creation, I enjoy talking about marketing. And yeah, I've evolved it, and yeah, it's sort of changed, and depending on like the guest will kind of tailor the conversation slightly. But I also don't overthink the conversation, because I trust in myself as an interviewer to ask, I guess, poignant questions, or like what naturally comes to my mind. And I think sometimes when we look at content, it's not in this box, right? I watched a video this morning talking about the fact that like one of the reasons why they're not, the person in question wasn't on YouTube, was because he was constantly concerned about, he sells video production, so it has to look good, has to sound good, and I followed the logic of yes, sure, but actually sometimes done is better than perfect if it's a barrier. Do you, like, how do you, when you look at either, and I'm sure we'll get onto the podcast you're launching, but like when you work with clients, or when you're maybe looking at your own podcast, like, how do you balance that line of, okay, it's done, but actually there's these things that that could be better? Do you hold a podcast back? Would you reshoot a podcast? Like, where's your line?
Yeah, I think you'd want to know that before even starting, frankly. If you want it to be polished, and the client's a big company, for example, you want it to be polished, you start from there. That's kind of, the level is set effectively. And going on from there, in terms of, you know, if it looks scrappy, there's kind of growing evidence that a scrappier look still appeals on the right platform. I was reading recently about TikTok and how people, or watchers or users of TikTok, prefer the raw content, the raw sort of footage and stuff. So someone literally picking up their phone and talking, there's no kind of green screen, no one's putting any effects or whatever. If the content looks like that on TikTok, it sells on TikTok. Yeah. Whereas on YouTube, like you were saying, people kind of expect a bit more of a polished thing. But I think authenticity is quite a big thing these days when it comes to content. And like you were saying with your questions and it's coming off the dome and stuff, that's in some ways kind of seen as a more better or nicer to watch compared with a completely polished, you know, you've gone through 20 questions with a fine-tooth comb and you're only asking 10 because they're like the best ones only. It doesn't, like, conversations don't work like that, and that's ultimately what podcasts are.
I think that's an important point. I think that there is obviously a line when it comes to like the quality, if like, especially if it's what you sell, like what I sell is video production, so there is a line. But I also think that there's an opportunity cost of refilming a conversation that isn't the first one, for example. Right? So to give you some context, last week or so, I filmed a podcast with my mum, and that post, me announcing the fact I did it, did really well, which kind of doesn't surprise me to an extent. It doesn't, but there's actually a tech like challenge with that podcast because one of the cameras isn't in focus. So my camera isn't in focus. So I was in a position last week, and I think I pretty much made the decision I'm just going to work around it. But I'm in a position where I'm like, the episode is really strong in regards to the content, but it's not perfect video production wise. Do I reshoot it with the potential opportunity that it will feel different and the conversation will maybe come across differently? Or do I work around the fact I've got multiple cameras and I fix it that way? Or do I just go with, okay, it's out of focus. It's not far out of focus, it's maybe an inch, like a tiny amount. But is that an approach some people should take? Do you think they should get like out of the way of the content sometimes? Because I could really sit here and like lose my shit over the fact that one angle's out of focus, but it is what it is.
Yeah. I think the content is what matters most. I think if you try to reshoot it, it's never getting anywhere near the same, especially if it was a good episode.
Yeah.
And it's your mum, right? So it's personal to you, and it's like an emotional element to it.
Yeah.
And I know what you mean. You're coming at it kind of from like an editor's perspective, and it's just going to annoy you forever. But the average watcher probably won't bother them that much, I'd say. So actually, if the content's really good, I guess like you say, you could in theory refilm your bits of like, you could pretend you're there again.
Yeah.
Unless you're a particularly good actor, it's it's not gonna work.
Yeah.
So I would say no. I'd say take the hit on the
because
slightly blurry
I
image.
also look at it from a perspective, from my point of view at least, by saying, okay, well, in the grand scheme of all the episodes I've got in production, that's one episode out of 20, right? Like this week, I think I'm filming like 9 or 10, right? Total. And I think for me, it's like the action will always outweigh that, and maybe that one with my mum isn't perfect from a production point of view, but the conversation, the content's really powerful.
Yeah.
So I think that's the thing people need to focus on. I think that's when, especially when they start, I think they get in the way. Like they get in their way sometimes, and they're constantly like, it needs to be £40,000 of production. It needs to be this, and I only need £45,000 because Stephen Bartlett's known for like what he did with Diary of a CEO and like how he then scaled that to the point he did. But I think we don't look at the journey sometimes that Stephen went on specifically. If we're going to use him as an example, anyone with a big podcast, we don't look at the micro testing that happened through the journey to then get to the point where they're at today. I mean, have you confirmed like where you are with the podcast? Like, where's your podcast?
So yeah, yet to officially launch, but all the stuff's going on in the background basically at this point. I've got first bunch of guests booked, got the studio booked, and in terms of the background work, in terms of questions and what I'm thinking of asking and how I want it to look, that's all sort of down in my head.
Yeah.
So it's I've got to start it now. I've got the dates booked in, so it's just a case of starting when it starts.
Happy days. That's super exciting. I mean, for people who may be interested, I mean, how did you come up with the idea? What is the idea? Like, what are you going to be talking about? Like, where's that? And I think it's really important to also highlight, and something I try to do is like collaborate with other people rather than, because some maybe will be watching this and go, but Colton, that could be like technically you're a competitor in some ways, right?
Yeah.
But I'm like, no, actually, because I think we can both work together to actually create a better show as a whole, right? And lean into each other's skills where it makes sense. But I mean, just to reiterate the question, I mean, where, what, and how is your podcast going to be about?
Yeah, so it's called How Do You Money? And that's the idea. That's the sort of opening question somewhat. So it doesn't actually make grammatical sense, obviously. But I think most people can get from that. It's talking to people about their own personal relationship with money. Strictly not an advice show, because I'm not an expert with money. And it's purely human interest. So I'm going to be talking to people about their money habits, things like how often do they check their banking app.
Mm-hmm.
When you ask people these questions in day-to-day conversation, it's amazing how different the answers are. How people in relationships deal with money between them. Everyone does it differently. And so like the crux is that twofold. First of all, in the UK, we're just not taught what to do with money in school. College, university, whatever.
Do you think we should?
Yes, absolutely.
That should be in school?
Absolutely, yeah. Because it's a fundamental life skill. As you know, we had a short conversation about money at the start.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I think it definitely should be. But at the moment it's not, right? And so I think as a result, two things happen. Number one, everyone makes up their own way. Second of all, people are too scared to talk about it because there's no official guidelines from the start.
Do you think that's an insecurity? Do you think if I say that I nearly lost the business in 2024 or previously, that you're going to judge me? Do you think it comes from that?
Absolutely, yeah.
Do you think that I'm going to think that you think I'm a failure? Can.